On a rotting log in a damp forest, there is a smear of bright yellow goo. It looks like something a dog threw up, or scrambled eggs left out too long. Most people would step over it without a second glance, if they noticed it at all. That smear has no brain. It has no nerves. It has no eyes, no mouth, no organs of any kind. It is not an animal. It is not a plant. It is not even a fungus, despite its name. And yet, in a laboratory, this brainless yellow goo solved a maze, finding the shortest path through it to reach food. Then scientists gave it a far harder challenge. They laid out food in the shape of the cities around Tokyo, one of the most complex urban regions on Earth. And the goo grew itself into a network that matched the efficiency of Tokyo's real, human-designed rail system. A system that took engineers decades to perfect. We call it slime mold. And it is one of the most quietly mind-bending organisms alive, because it forces a very uncomfortable question. How does something with no brain solve problems that challenge our best engineers? The answer is not that it is secretly intelligent. The truth is stranger than that. So let me show you what slime mold really is, and why a blob of goo is making scientists rethink what problem-solving even means. Let us start with what this thing actually is, because almost everything about it is confusing. The star of our story is a slime mold with the scientific name Physarum polycephalum, which roughly means the many-headed slime. Despite the word mold, it is not a fungus. It belongs to a strange group of life called protists, the oddball kingdom of living things that do not fit neatly as animals, plants, or fungi. And here is the first thing that breaks your brain a little. That entire spreading yellow blob, which can grow to the size of a dinner plate or larger, is a single cell. Not a colony of millions of cells like you or me. One single cell. It just happens to be a giant one, with thousands of nuclei, the little control centers, all floating inside one continuous body, with no internal walls. So when you look at slime mold, you are not looking at a creature made of many parts. You are looking at one enormous cell that has spread itself across the forest floor like a living puddle. And this way of life is old. Slime molds have been creeping across the planet for hundreds of millions of years, since long before any animal grew a brain, a backbone, or even a proper nervous system. So this is not some failed experiment that simply never got around to evolving a brain. It is a separate, ancient branch of life that solved the basic problems of finding food, exploring space, and avoiding danger using a completely different toolkit than the one that eventually led to us. And it has been quietly succeeding with that approach, more or less unchanged, for an almost unimaginable stretch of time. So how does a single cell live, and move, and eat? It spreads. The slime mold creeps outward as a web of branching tubes and fans, oozing across logs and leaf litter, searching for food. It eats by simply flowing over bacteria and fungal spores and absorbing them. And it moves in a way that is genuinely hypnotic. Inside those tubes, its living contents flow back and forth in a pulsing rhythm, surging one direction, then reversing, then surging again. Scientists call this shuttle streaming. By pumping its insides toward the areas that smell like food and away from areas that do not, the whole blob slowly flows in the direction it wants to go. It has no muscles and no legs. It moves by sloshing itself around. And when conditions turn against it, when the log dries out or the food runs low, the slime mold has an escape plan. It can stop being a spreading blob altogether and grow tiny stalks that release spores into the air. Tough little packages that drift away and wait out the bad times. When water and food return, those spores hatch into small single-celled forms that swim or crawl, find one another, and merge back together to build a new blob. So the yellow goo on the log is only one stage of its life. It can scatter itself into the wind as dust and reassemble somewhere better later on. It is genuinely hard to kill something that can turn into spores and simply start over. Now here is where it gets strange, and where this humble goo became famous. In the year 2000, scientists ran a now legendary experiment. They took a slime mold and placed it inside a small maze, the kind you might design for a mouse. Then they put a pile of food at two separate points in that maze. At first, The slime mold did what it always does. It spread out everywhere, filling the entire maze, exploring every corridor and dead end at once. But then something remarkable happened. Over the next several hours, the slime mold pulled back. It withdrew from the dead ends and the longer routes, and it concentrated its body into a single thick tube connecting the two food sources along the shortest possible path through the maze. A brainless blob had solved the maze. It found the most efficient route between 2 points, with no eyes to see the layout and no mind to plan a strategy. And it was not a one-time fluke. The slime mold did this reliably, again and again, settling on the shortest route every time. Think about what that actually requires. To find the shortest path, the blob effectively had to weigh every possible route through the maze and keep only the best one. We solved that kind of puzzle with a brain and a plan. The slime mold solved it by spreading into everything at once, then letting the inefficient parts of itself quietly fade away until only the right answer was left standing. And it gets stranger, because a few years later, in 2010, a team of researchers decided to push this much further. They built a tiny map. They took a flat surface shaped like the region around Tokyo, and at the location of each major town and city surrounding the capital, they placed a flake of food. Then, they put the slime mold down on the spot, representing central Tokyo, and they let it grow. If you appreciate the honest version of stories like this, the one that respects both the wonder and the facts, subscribe. Every week we go into worlds almost no one looks at twice. And what this blob did next is exactly the kind of thing that gets wildly exaggerated online. So, I want to tell it to you straight. The slime mold spread out across the map, then refined itself, reinforcing the useful connections between food sources and abandoning the ones that did not help. And when it finished, the network of tubes it had built looked strikingly like the real Tokyo rail network. Now, I need to be precise here, because this is where people overstate it. The slime mold did not magically redraw the exact subway map of Tokyo. What it did was arrive at a network with roughly the same efficiency, the same cost, and the same resilience as the rail system that human engineers spent decades designing. In other words, this brainless goo independently found a solution to a hard network problem that was about as good as the one our experts produced. That is the real, careful claim, and it is astonishing enough without any exaggeration. There was an extra detail that impressed the researchers most. A good transport network cannot only be efficient, it also has to be tough. If one line goes down, the whole system should not fall apart. And the slime mold built that toughness in on its own. It did not link the cities with the bare minimum of connections, which would snap easily under stress. It added a few extra backup routes, so that if one link were cut, the network could still carry on. The blob had balanced efficiency against resilience, the exact trade-off human engineers wrestle with when they plan real infrastructure. And it managed it with no engineer anywhere inside. So, how is this possible? How does a single cell, with no brain, solve problems that look like they require planning and intelligence? This is the most important part, so let me be very clear. The slime mold is not thinking. It is not intelligent in the way you and I are. It has no thoughts, no awareness, no mind-weighing options. What it has is a simple rule, repeated everywhere across its body at once. Here is the rule. Wherever the slime mold's flowing contents move easily and bring back food, those tubes get reinforced and grow thicker. Wherever flow is weak and brings back little, those tubes wither and are abandoned. That is it. Each tiny piece of the blob just follows that local feedback. Strengthen what works, drop what does not. There is no central planner. But when millions of tiny pieces all follow that rule together, a globally efficient network emerges on its own. The intelligence is not in any one place. It is spread across the whole organism, in the pattern, not in a brain. Scientists call this distributed problem solving, or emergent computation. The blob solves the problem the way a river finds the lowest path downhill, not by thinking, but by countless small adjustments adding up to a smart-looking result. That pulsing rhythm inside its tubes is doing more than shuttling food around to. It is, in a sense, how the slime mold carries information across its entire body. A change in one place, a new food source, a patch of something unpleasant, alters the rhythm there, and that change ripples outward through the network, nudging the flow everywhere else. There is no command being sent from a control room, because there is no control room. The whole body is both the message and the messenger. It computes with its own movement, using the surge and retreat of its insides as the thinking and the doing at the same time. And it gets stranger still, because the slime mold can do something that looks a lot like memory. In one careful experiment, researchers put a harmless but bitter substance in the slime mold's path, something it did not like, but that could not hurt it. At first, the slime mold slowed down and hesitated, avoiding the unpleasant stuff. But when it met that same harmless substance again and again, it gradually learned to ignore it and cross right over, as if it had figured out there was nothing to fear. This is a basic form of learning called habituation. And here is the truly weird part. When a slime mold that had learned this was fused together with one that had not, the naive blob picked up the behavior from its experienced partner. The knowledge, if we can even call it that, passed between them when their bodies merged. And there was a final detail that sealed it as real learning. If the researchers left the habituated slime mold alone for a while, with no more of the bitter substance, it forgot. The next time it met the stuff, it hesitated and avoided it all over again, just like a beginner, slowing down, getting used to something harmless, then forgetting it after a rest. Those are the exact fingerprints of true habituation, the same simplest form of learning we see in animals that do have brains. The slime mold just manages it with none. But I have to stay honest with you. This is not understanding. It is not thought. The slime mold does not know anything in the way you know your own name. It is the simplest, most primitive form of learning we are aware of, stored not in a mind, but in the very chemistry and structure of the organism's body. It is learning without a learner. And that is exactly what makes it so unsettling and so fascinating. So what do we do with an organism like this? Quite a lot, as it turns out. Because the slime mold is so good at building efficient networks, engineers and computer scientists study it for ideas. Its behavior has inspired new ways to design transport systems, to route information through networks, and to tackle hard optimization problems that are difficult even for computers. There is a whole field exploring what is called unconventional computing, where instead of using silicon chips, researchers use living systems, like the slime mold itself, to carry out a kind of calculation. A blob of goo used as a computer. That is not a metaphor. That is a real area of research. This strange creature has even crept into our culture. A zoo in Paris once put a slime mold on public display and nicknamed it the Blob, after the old science fiction movie monster, the creeping mass that swallowed everything in its path. The real thing is far smaller and completely harmless to us, but the comparison is fair enough. A spreading, brainless, yellow mass that hunts, learns, and solves problems does sound like something out of a horror film. The only difference is that this one is real, and it is very likely living in a forest not far from you right now. And this is where the slime mold quietly overturns one of our deepest assumptions. We tend to believe that solving problems, finding efficient solutions, learning from experience, all require a brain, a nervous system, something like us. The slime mold proves that is not true. Problem solving can emerge from a single cell with no brain at all, just from simple rules followed everywhere at once. Intelligence, or at least intelligent-looking behavior, may not need a mind to host it. It can arise from the pattern itself. That should make you look at the world a little differently. The forest floor is full of these organisms, quietly computing, optimizing, and adjusting, with nothing we would recognize as a thought. And if a blob of goo can do this, then the line between living and thinking, between a body and a brain, is far blurrier than we like to imagine. So let us go back to that smear of yellow on the rotting log. You know now what it really is. Not garbage, not slime to be wiped away, but a single, enormous cell that lives as a living network. A creature with no brain, no nerves, and no mind that can flow through a maze and find the shortest path. That can map out a transport network as efficient as one designed by human engineers. That can even learn, in the most primitive way, to ignore a harmless threat and pass that lesson to another of its kind by merging bodies. It does all of this not by thinking, but by following one simple rule, in millions of places at once, until something that looks like genius emerges from pure simplicity. That is the real lesson of slime mold. We assume intelligence has to look like us, has to live in a brain, has to involve a thinking self. This humble goo suggests that nature found other ways to solve problems long before anything grew a brain at all, and that some of those ways are still here, oozing quietly across the forest floor. The brain was one solution to staying alive in a hard world. It was never the only one, and it may not even have been the first. So here is my question for you, and I genuinely want to know what you think. If a single cell with no brain can solve a maze and rival a city's rail network, then what is a brain actually for? And how much of what we proudly call thinking might really just be simple rules, adding up? If this changed the way you see the goo on a log, subscribe. Every week we go into worlds almost no one looks at twice. And the next time you are walking through a damp forest, and you spot a strange smear of bright yellow on a fallen tree, look a little closer. You might be looking at one of the oldest problem solvers on Earth, quietly working away, with no mind at all.